good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to this session yet again of Inspiring Conversation. I had to turn this button on, so my brain just stopped there a little bit. So welcome to the stream. I am Hedin, and you can find the former or the episodes from the past on YouTube, Spotify, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And I know they are on Apple Podcast, but just Google Inspiring Conversations, hands-on coaching, Inspiring Conversations, and then you will find everything about us or me. Let's remind ourselves why Inspiring Conversations are. It's all about creating conversations that really matter. We are diving into ways to connect deeply, break down barriers, and build moments that inspire trust and growth, whether it's with your team at work or in your everyday chats. We will bring more positivity, realness, and impact into every conversation. And as I mentioned, I am live from Kópavogur in Iceland, and I live close to the sea, so salty windows. That is what I get. So let's move on to today's guest. And now we are getting into conflict. Gloves on, or what? Mr. Graham Norris. I was almost going to say Graham Norton, but that is totally different person. And he is definitely not, he is totally not in a conflict management. Graham.
I am.
You are, but he is not.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
It's like you drifted away. I was just like, why?
No, I was here. I'm here all the time.
I could see on your face. I was just like, is he thinking about a yacht?
Well, that's it. You see, in that moment, we had a little bit of a conflict, a misunderstanding, yes. But we managed it well.
Yes, thank you. So, welcome to this chat. No, welcome to the session, Graham. I have to focus. Stop, go into my brain and disturb me. So,
I'm here.
Graham Norris, you are in the UK and you are independent workplace relationship and conflict consultant.
It's a good title. Well done.
Early intervention for SME leaders.
Yep.
So, I just want to know, because you are British, and the Brits are the most polite people on the planet, because they are always saying, oh, I'm sorry. So, are there really any conflicts in the UK?
That's fascinating. It's all about perception, isn't it? The perception that we're very polite people. Saying I'm sorry doesn't mean I'm polite. I could be thinking, get lost. But what I say is, I'm sorry.
No!
Absolutely.
And, are you crazy? No.
I could quote you a report by ACAS. We've had 3 reports done in the last 10 years about the cost of conflict in the UK, and it's about £28.5 billion. So that report alone suggests that we're not very polite. We're not good at managing conflict.
I need to write that down. £28.5
billion.
Billion pounds.
That was produced by ACAS, so it's a pretty credible resource.
And was that for the year, like for 2025, or
annually? That's £1,000. That's £1,000 per person per year.
What?
Absolutely.
What?
That stymies your myth that we're polite, but that's okay. See, there we have again some conflicts about how, to what extent we're talking about the same thing here. Misinterpretation. So you see us as very polite because we say sorry, and I'm not sure what sorry means.
I'm just.
My wife says sorry a lot, and she don't mean you're wrong. but she's too polite to say that. She said, "Oh, I'm sorry." She's not sorry at all. It's like, it's your mistake. I didn't do anything, and she says, "I'm sorry." But I
So
love
the
it.
next time I will be in the UK and people say to me, "I'm sorry," then I have to stop them and say, "Tell me what's on your mind."
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. That's really good. So
So
there's what we say and what we intend, and they're different.
so
Or the words
why?
received.
Yeah, you mentioned like on your LinkedIn page, because there is you are on LinkedIn and WhatsApp, because you tell me very frequently that you are the worst marketing person ever. But how is it that, like you say, in small businesses there is no HR buffer? So when communication shifts, even subtly, how do you say it? Subtly,
Subtly, yeah.
yes. Why are you using so hard words for non-English speaking people?
Therein
Productivity, no,
lies the issue.
yeah. Even subtly, it affects decision making, culture, productivity, client relationships, and ultimately the stability of the organization.
Yeah.
So how do you come in? Like, but yeah, and my first question is, because you are perceived so polite, and you say 28.5 billion
Brilliant.
pounds
Absolutely.
in
And then
in conflict.
after this call, I'll send you a link to the report, and then you can read it.
Well, we post it on the
Yeah,
LinkedIn
we can do it
page for
there.
the Inspire, and people then can look at. But do companies say, "Ooh, we have a conflict. Let's get in Graham Norris"?
That's a really good question. I think what happens is, in SMEs, they don't have the HR buffer, and even if in corporate, when you have HR, I'm not, challenging HR professionals here. Some of them are not conflict trained. So in certainly in SMEs, there's probably five or six. I've got a couple of clients at the moment, and there's three directors. And what happens is things do not go the way they want to, and you're trying to run a business and you're trying to improve the business. I think the good metaphor for is flying a plane and building it at the same time. It's hard to do that.
Yes.
So they sit there and think, how can you do that? And they just get stuck. And here's a question, Hedden. Were you taught in school how to manage conflict? I'm assuming the answer is no. And if you said to me, if there was one intervention I could leave, from the UK, it would to have peer mediation schools in every school. And I've done some peer mediation work. And what happens is the young people learn the skills at a very young age and just manage their relationships better. You know, so
Uh,
to answer your question,
yeah.
what happens is people get stuck in a situation, they can't find their way forward, and then assuming they think, well, how do we go and resolve this? You're amazed at the words that people put in to search engines, because the word conflict, a lot of people are conflict averse, so they will not use that word. So they go looking for things, and eventually they stumble across lots of options, and I'm one of those options. So you get a phone call, and it's a difficult phone call because people don't put their hand up and say we can't manage conflict. They don't say that. What they
But
say is things like, we've seen your website, we've seen your profile, we think you might better help us. um, you know we've got some difficulties, and that's the word they use. They don't use the word conflict.
I just want to, before you continue, because Jay Setchell, my guest from last week,
Hmm.
who was absolutely brilliant, he died 3 times but survived, and he says spot on about sorry. So that is the perception. People, he's from the US. So that is
Correct.
probably like, or maybe they also, I don't know, Jay, you can maybe say, like, are people in the US always saying, oh, sorry, sorry, sorry? Because I find it fascinating. But okay, back to the conflict, because when you were talking about in school, if I got taught in school, I taught my kids that violence never does anything in a conflict. It is talking about it. But streetwise is a word that comes to mind. That sometimes, and back in the days, and me and my wife, we are the same age, we were in the same school and whatnot. And sometimes you say that life begins when you have finished going to elementary school, going to the high school, going to university. And when you are finished there, then you figure out, oh, when you get out of the secure premises, then you just, some people are just like, what is this? I don't know what this, how do I do this? And then they haven't got a clue. And so you are saying that people like in the UK, they would rather, I will put in quotation marks, die than admitting that they have a conflict on their hand.
No, I wouldn't say that at all. No, I think that's a red herring. I think going down the school bit is a it's not a red herring, but it's not going to get us anywhere. What I think is interesting is you're talking about the word conflict, and what the word conflict means different things to different people. If we were in a workshop environment, I would turn around and say, let's do a word association exercise. What words do you personally associate with conflict? And if we did that, okay, most people would say stress, fight, defense, blame, quarrel, clash, battle, argue, row, war. That's what most people say. Now, there's always, okay, the 20% who've done some work, or they're HR orientated, or they're coaches, and then they say, well, in actual fact, in a parallel world, they would use words like perception, clarity, creativity, enlightenment, awareness, appreciation. And what the word that people would use very often depends on their upbringing. So if you came from a family where there were lots of parental arguments, okay, sibling rivalry, you get this idea, you evolve this idea that conflict is adverse, conflict is a fight. And I think this is about, leadership interventions. And the first thing I would say to do is to recognize that conflict could be on a spectrum. At one end, it could be all those negative words, but on the other end of the spectrum is things like enlightenment, clarity, because it's really important. If you don't have the positive end of the spectrum, you're never going to have the disagreements will be very negative. And people often say, well, how do we get creativity in our organization? And I say, well, manage conflict better. Because until you've got, we've had some conflicts, minor conflicts on here, and that's brought some clarity and some enlightenment and some new ideas and some fresh thinking. If we all think the same way, we're not going to get some creativity. But equally, what we don't want is what I think is a very adverse way of managing conflict. And I think your joke was fine, but you didn't learn about conflict at school. I didn't learn about managing conflict at school. I learned about conflict a number of years ago when I was asked to be a community mediator in a city called Bristol, quite a big city around the south. And that's where I learned about conflict. And I've been learning about conflict ever since. It's a never-ending journey for me.
Yeah. So like Jay, because he has to go. I know he has to go, but he will probably see the session later on. So before I go, I just want to mention that on conflict, I was through conflict management and resolution with the fifth largest corporation in America over 40 years ago. He's 76, just to have that by clear. Over 40 years ago, and both people or all the parties involved, they have to be willing and wanting to resolve the conflict, whatever that may be. One person may perceive something is a conflict and the other person doesn't see it that way at all. So now you have a conflict about the conflict. but interesting to hear other perceptions. So he will be in a treat, because I think you are absolutely amazing talking about this, because that brings me to the topic. When conflict is the message, not the problem, thinking about how often workplace conflicts get treated as something to fix, smooth over, or make disappear, as if tension itself is the failure. So how do we go? Like as Jay mentioned, for me, I think if there is some conflict in quotation marks, I will not live or see it as a conflict, whereas you might see it as a conflict, or duty might see it as a conflict. How is it? How extreme will it be? How extreme does it get before the companies call Graham Norris and say, yeah, we think we have some situation here? Because as you mentioned in the beginning, they don't want to say the word conflict. So how bad can a situation be which you just come in and say, scratch your head and say, why didn't you call me 2 years ago?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point. I was on talking to some housing officers today on an informational call, and from a community mediation point of view, very often the referral to the organisation happens 2 years down the line, and what you then got is two people who are massively entrenched in their belief that they are right, and that they're not going to move from that position. So one of the things we say to them is refer early. And then they say, well, what does early mean? And I think I just want to just take a rain check and go back a little bit, because I think it's important. The question Jay positions assumes that conflict is now. It doesn't happen like that. It doesn't happen like that. So what happens is that I like the metaphor of the fire. I think that's quite important. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's lots of very complex, very well-meaning, robust academic models. And I don't always think that when I'm talking to SME owners who just want to get their product out the door, and it's quite hard. And I use the FIRE model. So I say within an organization, there's always what I call combustible material. And what does that mean? It could mean things like, time priorities, value clashes, misinterpreting, or emails that are badly written. So the combustion material is always there. And what it takes to get it going is a spark. And a spark could be quite simple. It's never major. It's something small. It is ambiguous. It's easily misinterpreted. It's quite low key, but it has huge potential. So this idea of, people want to say, we're way away from that position where the conflict starts. So you've got a small little spark, and what happens next depends. And if people aren't aware of this sort of content, they have two choices. They can react or respond. So if you send me an email and I misinterpret it, because you're a nice guy, Hedden, you're not going to send me an email that is deliberately offensive. Now, I know that, and I know that about you. But when I read the email, because you did it late last night and you were in a bit of a hurry and you had 6 other emails, you didn't top and tail it. And I appear as that, I've upset Hedden. He's having a go at me. Now, the reality is nothing like that, but that's a spark. Now, you and I know each other quite well. So the first thing I'm going to do is say back and say, didn't quite get the gist of your email. Everything all right? But that's my choice. So I responded to that. I could have reacted, oh, sorry you're having a bad day. Write to me tomorrow when you're a bit happier. Boom. And then you get that email in a stressful situation of 25 others you got to finish before 12 o'clock. And your response is, There's nothing wrong with me. It's how you interpret it. Get real. Bang, there we've gone.
Are you telling me that I'm not happy?
But that's what happens. And I could give you dozens and dozens and dozens of examples in lots of different contexts as to how these little sparks trigger off all the time and people react to that. So in workplace mediation, what happens is typically I'm upset by your email. So I go off and find Gene by the photocopier, or I get on a Zoom call with Gene and say, just had this really pissy text from Hedden. What's up with him? Oh, he says that to me all the time. And now we're starting to create a myth about Hedden. Okay. And then we have somebody else in, and all before you know it, half the office think you're a bad person. And someone who sits on both camps says, Hedden, you aware people think you're not being very fair? And you're our team leader, lots of pressure, a lot of hassle. They just got to get on with it. So your choice to how to handle that is to think, I'm just going to ignore it and it'll go away. Your choice might be, well, if I do nothing, perhaps they'll come round, it'll disappear. I could turn around and say, it's come to my notice that some of you think my emails are a bit, inappropriate. I'm very busy. I've got lots of tasks. If you want to come and talk to me. Woo. So how we intervene determines whether in an office-based environment that conflict escalates. And that could be slow escalation. I could escalate by not talking to you anymore. I've got a situation at the moment where that's real. The person concerned is just not turning up. The lights are on, but no one's on home. So they're turning up, they're being there, but they're not sharing information. They're not responding quickly to emails. They're not necessarily engaging. So it's a silent treatment. And that's really, really, really upsetting me.
Yeah, but when in that scenario,
yeah,
is that the owners or is it team members, or like how is then the wheel of the company go? Like, well, then there is a wedge in the wheel.
But that's the whole thing, isn't it? So these conflicts, they're not necessarily open fights. But I can be very willful in not engaging. Because if I'm not having conversations with you, if I'm not engaging in the activities, the minimum gets done. But you've picked on something critical there. The cost of conflict, that 28.5 billion, part of that is people not showing up, the work not being done, the work not being done to the right standard, the work not enough people being included, and things like that. People get fed up and they go off sick because there's always stress and anxiety associated with that. So the work does get done, but it's not nearly as productive as it could be. So in small, a typical example of three directors, different stages, different roles, different levels of understanding about what the problem is. Some just get on and do it, bullnosed. They plow on through and, take it or leave it type attitude. Others are, I would say, probably have a different degree of emotional intelligence. The empathy is there, the social skills are there, and they feel hurt by it. And they try and connect with the other person, but it's met with, we're very busy, we haven't got time for this.
But when you mentioned Bristol and you started there, doing this, when I gathered that you just jumped in the pool and just said, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. So what was it that intrigued you to, like, what in the conflict management or in the beginning, what was it that you said, ooh, this is interesting. This might actually be something that I could work with.
I'll tell you why, because I remember the moment when I got engaged. I don't know if you remember, but there was a picture in the UK for the World War One recruiters. Your country needs you. And they
Yeah.
had that up there, and it said, "Do you want to make a difference? Do you value equality and fairness?" And that just pulled my buttons. So that's from a value point of view. I engaged with that. And you talk about jumping in the deep end. It was a really, really robust training course where every weekend for about 3 months, there were 2.5 hours actually role playing and being involved in mediations. It wasn't classic delivery, now go and do it. I refuse to believe that you can learn mediation from a book and from courses. You learn mediation skills, working alongside experienced mediators, following a process, okay, and just learning on the job. I still attend the workshops. I still attend those because I'm a lifelong learner. But I didn't just jump in the pool. So then I went out with for many years with a very experienced mediator. And it was just fascinating how you can see how we have these two stories. It's always the case. And people say to me, "What do you do?" I spend time sitting in rooms with two people who are absolutely believe they're both right. And I try and get them to engage in curiosity. So I experience that, and I experience it every time I'm mediation. You got these two people who believe their story is right. And from a conflict management, I think from a leadership point of view, it's worth recognizing that there will always be two truths. The third truth is what the two people create together when they go through a structured, facilitated process. It doesn't have to be a mediation. I think you can sit down with two people and use mediation, facilitation skills. It doesn't have to be a mediation, but all you're trying to do is to get if you said to me, what's the Holy Grail? Shared understanding.
But back when you started,
Yeah.
were you an employee, or did you just, or like, were you in the corporation,
No, I
or were
was
it
I was
started?
doing coaching work. I've always been facilitation, coaching, training. That's my background.
Okay.
So I started using it. And my master's in organizational development that I did at Bristol University, and they did management of change as one of the major themes. And of course, within that, my thinking is based on Peter Senge's work in the fifth discipline. It's all about systems thinking, mental models, etc. So for me, I sort of got involved with mediation at a time when I was really thinking about organizations, how they work, how leadership functions, how to manage change. And that's what mediation is. It's managing change. You have two people who are locked, and what you want is two people who agree about a way forward. So that's when the point that Jay mentioned, when you get to the point where you've got two people to in a situation where they're locked. My point is that doesn't happen overnight. And this is about leadership, this course about leadership. So I think leaders, you said to me, what intervention would be useful? What do they need to get out of this? Is to know that when someone says something, there's a difference between what they intended to say and how that person's receiving it. And then to be curious as to what has actually been landed. So I could manage a dispute on my own behalf with somebody else. So I might turn around and say, and I'm assuming that you're there and we're on the end of a phone or a Zoom call, and I can see a scowl, an instant scowl. Now, something I've said hasn't landed. You're not necessarily aware in the moment you've scowled at me, and I don't take your scowl as an offensive. I would then turn around and say, I'm just curious what I said there. I'm not sure how that landed. What do you think? And in the moment, that spark, which was something I said that created a scowl, gone away.
I'm just 28.5 billion pounds. Like, why on earth? Like, they could do a whole lot of stuff with that money.
Absolutely. Think of the hospitals, the nurses, and the trains, and the work in the schools. We have a real problem in the UK with special education needs. You know, there's just not enough money to cater for the kids. But the point here is that if people were aware of the skill, take that fire model, if they understood that in its simplicity, they would begin to practice noticing those little sparks.
But in my mind, I
prevent them escalating. That
yeah.
prevent people, and it's the escalation that's expensive. You know, what you said to me, when do I get called in? I get called in when people are going off sick. I get people going in when there's been a stand-up row, and no one in the team is joining Zoom calls. They just don't join. You know, because everyone feels difficult. They know that the meeting is going to be tense. They can, even if it's remote, they feel the tension, and people are guarded. People giving one-word answers. They want to get off the call as quickly as possible and get on with the work. But the work is governed by the meetings. So we don't have the meetings because people don't talk, or two people argue. One person's got an agenda. It's too late by that stage. It's expensive. So intervening as early as possible is the best way. But head-on people don't. They don't. They let it go. They run away from it. They think it'll resolve itself, or they're quite combative and argumentative, wanting to win.
Yeah.
And the big thing I say to people, you know, when my mediation, I say, look, I just really, this is my, you know, $64,000 question that changes things. I listen to people. Okay. I just listen. Everyone's always got the story. And when you do conflict management work, what people want to do is to get me on their side. They don't understand the neutrality of a, you know, independent, non-judgmental, neutral. They don't understand that. They don't. So they try and get me on their side. And they tell me the story and how bad the other person is. And I listen and I ask questions and I nod and I say and I repeat back and do all those sorts of things. But I really want to understand the story, and I want to understand what the issues are, what's affecting them. And then when I understand that, I turn around and I say, head-on, let's role play for a second. Head-on, within your team, if I've got this right, you've got 6 people, and you feel that you've fallen out with all 6 of them because they really didn't understand your plan, how the project would be delivered, and you're now losing sleep. You know that 3 of the members only do a 3-day week rather than a 5-day week because they just can't come in on the days when there's team meetings. You know that the customers are talking to you about the fact that deliveries are late, that they can't get information, and that whereas previously all team members knew what was going on, they're having to repeat things. So clearly that information isn't being, you know, shared around the team. And I say, is that right? You go, yes. And I'd say, well, that sounds really bad. It sounds as though things are really falling apart. They are. I don't know what to do about it. And I say, I've got a question for you. If it's this bad now, and it's been going on 6 months, in 6 months' time, if all of those things get worse, how will it be? And at that point there, I say nothing. Because that person's sitting there thinking, it's this bad now, and in 6 months' time, and that hits home. That really, really hits home. And then I say, so you've got a choice. You can get to that point where it's got worse progressively week on week in the way you're describing it to me. It's your words, not mine. You've told me these things are going on and they're getting worse. So if you do nothing now, that's going to carry on getting worse. And how will it be in 6 months' time? You already told me that 3 people are thinking of leaving. So they've been in your business 5 years. If they learn £10 worth of knowledge every day, do the maths. And they leave, 3 of them leave, that's £40,000 each walking out the door because they've learned, they know the business, they know the customers, they know the product, they know the system, and they're going to walk out the door. So you've got to retrain those people. That's going to take you 5 years to do it. And at that point there, that's the edge which says, we've got to do something about this.
But when you started talking about like people not showing up or my first thought was how childish. Why are you afraid? What are you afraid of?
Well, that's
Why
it,
is
isn't it?
it?
Yeah.
Why is it that people in general, I gather that why are we so afraid with conflict? Why are we so afraid of talking to our spouses or talking to our managers? And is it like
I tell
because
you, on my workshop course, we do this, and we get into some detail. There are some people who have have lived with conflict for a long time, and they just had enough of the worst sorts of conflict. So they are very, very conflict averse.
yeah,
They will do anything they can to avoid it. They've been through it. They've had enough. That's it. There's a really good tool I use, dynamics profile, and it helps people understand what their approach to conflict is. Yeah. So it helps people recognize that running away doesn't make any difference. Being argumentative doesn't make any difference. Hoping that it'll solve itself, applying the fridge process to people, just freeze them out. None of that makes any difference. It just makes things worse.
I just want to read it out. Like as a
Yeah,
qualified, this is from your LinkedIn page. As
yeah.
a qualified mediator and conflict coach, I combine structured, facilitated conversations with behavioral insight tools, including the conflict dynamics profile. When we are talking about if people are conflict aversive, is my thought also wanders to burnout because you are constantly living in this fear of, oh, if I meet Graham, he is a conflict, like I will be in conflict, we are in a conflict, and this is just, it's the same as living in a alcoholic home. Like you are codependent, you are always inside, it's just like the house is burning down, but on the outside, everything is going well. And then you realize that you can't live with this. Like how long? Like I will put this number up again, and this is a UK alone. So what would the number be if you look at the whole world?
Absolutely. I don't know. I mean, it's a useful, and it's one of three reports that have been written over the last 15 years, and they all come up the same order of magnitude. And my point about that is, if these three reports in the UK are coming up with the same result, what's being done to address that? And that's why I go, flying the plane and building at the same time. People just haven't got time. There's some really, really good work done by a variety of agencies and companies in this field, and gradually there's a shift. We have the idea, when people take a grievance out against another person, that's the worst thing in the world they could possibly do, because that's going to be investigated, it's confidential, and it'll either be upheld or won't. Let's suppose it's upheld. The person who the grievance was taken about is now really fed up. And are they going to be vengeful? Possibly. And they might be vengeful in a very quiet way. And if the person who put the grievance that wasn't upheld, they're really fed up because the misogynistic, biased people didn't listen to my point of view. So you will have a loser either way through a grievance process. So now what you've got is two people who went through a proven HR approved process, both feeling angry. What's the point of that? So often I get called in, I've done a number of these where they say, we've done the mediation, sorry, we've done the grievance, now we want the mediation, and you can't talk about the process of the grievance. So what I say is, And there's a drive to get this through in the UK. Use mediation as an intervention at the earliest possible stage. Because if you try and do it after a grievance has taken place, what you're really talking about is not mediation, because the case was either upheld or not. You're now looking at reconciliation. And that's where Jay made that point. The people have got to want to do that. And sometimes the hurt from one of the parties, you understand why they want to be reconciled, because you've got a manager and an employee, and that employee might be in the organization for 15 years and knows exactly how the organization works. We don't want either of you to leave, but they do not want to work together. So you can see why reconciliation comes in. And reconciliation uses very, very similar processes. But if people don't want to do that, then what you end up is what I call a mediated disengagement. We'll work together. We'll be professional. We'll do what we have to do. But I'm not going out drinking with you. And when it's a party, I'm not sitting on the same table as you.
Yeah. But it sounds like when I'm listening to you, all of a sudden bullying came up in my mind. And usually when somebody is bullied, the receiver leaves and the bully stays behind.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that comes to mind, because then you have the loser is gone, and not necessarily of good, because and often you hear about neighbor quarrel, and after 10 years of quarreling, and then you ask, so what is the quarrel about? And they can't even remember why it was. Maybe it was because the stone pebble was in the wrong place at the wrong hour. Like, it's just like, and then you just like, and what? And you haven't spoken to each other in 10 years.
Yeah.
What the heck? Like, why? Life is too short for that. But take us through, because, the conflict dynamics profile. Do you have a questionnaire, or like, how do you step into when you step into the company, like you have this conflict dynamics profile. So I gather that is something about answering questions or going
it
through
is. It's a standard, well proven, useful online tool. But it's like all things. If I think that's useful, I'll use it. But it's not all the case. So if a manager, a team leader says to me, I'd actually like to, as part of this process, I say to people that once you've been through a facilitated intervention, whether that's a mediation or not, you will see conflict differently. You'll experience conflict differently because you've been through the process. You'll know how it works. Most people, you say, if you go and ask people, would you like to go to mediation? They'll say no. Why? Because they don't necessarily understand the word. They don't understand what's involved, but they'll say no.
Oh, they probably think they're sick or something.
Whatever. Yeah. So, I could spend some time. Yeah, absolutely. Or some people think mediation, meditation. They get one letter in the spelling and they get mixed up about that. So I wouldn't necessarily go in, and sometimes just literally having a facilitated conversation is enough. But if a manager said to me, I'd like to, develop my conflict management skills, then I would turn around and say, well, let us put, as a conflict coach, I would use this because it comes up with I come up with, like all coaches, conflict action plan. And then the profile would highlight what someone's strengths are, what approaches, avoidance, cooperation, competition, that people are used to, and critically, what are people's hot buttons? If people know what hot buttons get them going, when that event happens, they're just half a page ahead and they go, deep breathe and ask a question.
Have you, because we are of certain age.
Yep.
Although
we're very young, Hedden.
Yes, only 29 plus.
Absolutely.
Said he and tossed his hair. So when have you encountered some deep frustrations or conflicts between, and you have maybe a generation gap, because now I know I have been thinking about the W word, like, okay, I will say it, woke. So and we, the older generation, we are just like, oh, get on with it. Like, this is not like, why are you crying over spilled milk or whatever? Whereas the younger people, they are just like, I don't get it. Why do you say it like this? Why is it that you? So when have you been in a dire situation, almost like, because there are these generations gap, and then
Yeah.
what do you tell to people? Like, do you tell the young people to look at it from his perspective, or the older generation's perspective, or what? How do we do that?
No, it's a really good question. Number one, I've never told anybody to do anything in a mediation. From a conflict resolution point of view, I might share some insights. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
sorry.
I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
think we
yeah,
can
yeah,
help
yeah.
people. I think the key thing is they've got to recognize, and I'll be honest, the work that I do before a facilitated meeting, I think is really important. I think it sets the scene, it prepares the ground, because very often people, we're having a conversation about this, but this would be off some people's chart. You know, they just wouldn't get it. So I would spend a lot of time helping them think through that they may be making some assumptions, that what they've said may be contextually bound, and there's another way of looking at this. I would help them think through, you know, how they can express what they're feeling about a situation, and how to use. I'm sure you're comfortable with the concept of a reframe. Yeah, you're just bloody difficult is a
Yeah.
statement.
Yes.
I find it difficult to concentrate when you shout at me. It's a different statement.
Yeah.
So classic I statement. So a lot of that work I would do beforehand. And it's about helping that person be ready for a facilitated conversation. And if you do that with both people, what I get out of that is an understanding of where some common ground might exist. So when we come together, however we do it, we'll end up with an agenda. And I would pick what I call the easy, low hanging fruit first. There's never just one issue.
Mm,
That simple. It's
yeah.
always, and if it's been going on for a couple of months, there'll be lots of things. So we do the work beforehand. Okay. And that work is really, really, really important. And then we come together, and I encourage people to practice and put into practice, and to say the things that we've talked about saying, and then to listen to the response and to clarify things. And what that does is it just maximizes the chance of success. But Hedden, I want to say this for the record, I never get a successful, I've never had a success for every mediation I've done. If you said to me, what's my percentage? I think it's in line with the national percentage, 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10. I had a very difficult case recently, and we didn't get anywhere. And it was a result of a grievance, then an appeal against that, which wasn't upheld. So one person's absolutely adamant that the organization's against them. So we went through what I call a nodding nod exercise. They turned up, they nodded their head, they said some things, they weren't going to shift. Nothing I could do could shift their thinking from them being a victim. So it doesn't work in every case.
But while talking to you, because I am in the midst of building a program, or a, call it, coaching workshop, or a
Yeah.
thinking workshop, because you have done the leadership profile where I sent you a questionnaire and we talked about the stuff and where you were at. And do you think that people, if they had, do you think that we have, I am thinking in terms of doing this easy, that you have this grit and you can look at affiliation and visionary. How are you in visionary? Are you controlling? No, that was not the word. Now it's gone. Dictating or
We'll come back.
Sorry.
The word will come back in a minute.
Yes, so you have pace setting, you have affiliation, you have coaching, you have democratic, you have visionary, and then if you have you have to do it. Just do it. Do as you're told. What is that? Yeah. So
Commanding.
Thank you. Woo.
Commanding.
It's a long day. So if people had, because I'm thinking about 4 sessions: leadership trait, how are you emotionally, the emotional intelligence, not the EQ. I'm not measuring anything. I'm just looking at scenarios like where you can, why do you, like, it's just to get you thinking about, oh, why am I reacting like this? And then you have the navigating conflict, and then effective communication. What are you putting through? Because I remember I was working in a youth club when MSN came, and there was this one situation where a girl, she was just all of a sudden, just like you mentioned, all of a sudden, she was just the talk of the school, and everybody was against her. And she just didn't realize. And I said, what happened? Well, we were talking on MSN. And I asked her, because you could print out conversations. And I think she came the next day with 30 pages, and I had to read them through. And I said, so when you say this and put a smiley face after it, this is definitely a combustion for the fire. And when we went through the conversation, all of a sudden she was just like, oh, yes, I see. Now I understand why I am. Because a smiley face or like you did now, like this face, you have these emojis for everything.
Yeah.
Not everybody. Well, and we are certainly of the age that an aubergine, like in our mind, an aubergine is just an aubergine, but in the young people's mind, it's totally different. And we don't like why. It's just a fruit or it's a vegetable. But like could you, in a situation when, if you ask people, why do you react this way? Why is it that this is a trigger in your fire? Why do you get mad if I say no? Or like however I word the phrase, or because I have my background, I'm Icelandic, I can trigger you, Graham. But that is just because my parents, they were born in 1925 and 1929. B, you have a younger parents maybe, okay, total different. Their values were totally different. They did not have as much as we have today. So, how can we help people just to say, why am I reacting like this?
That's a really good question. Hedden, how many pink cars have you seen in the place where you live this week?
0.
Right. I can guarantee you'll see a pink car in the next week.
Oh, don't do this to me, Graham, because I don't like
Why?
pink. Stop this. I will call you.
Why? Because I raised the question and it got a laugh. So emotionally, now you're triggered into pink. So that'll be a really powerful memory for you.
If that happens.
So what does that got to do with your question? So when we go through, helping people recognize things that they get triggered by, because triggering assumes I'm not part of the equation. It's automatic.
Yeah.
Fight or flight response. But eventually, if you notice long enough and practice long enough, you can think, let me give it, I'll share with you ladies of an elderly age with a blue rinse, in a car park with what I call a mom tone of voice. Young man, you can't park there. That's me gone. I just don't like that. So when that happens, occasionally it does. We have a place called Tesco's, and when that occasionally happens in Tesco's, I just breathe deeply. I look at my keys, I look up and I smile. But that's an informed choice. What I want to do is just go, get a life, move on.
That is what
Who do you think
young
you
people,
are? I
yeah,
can park where I like.
the
That's what I
young
want
people,
to do.
they call them the Karens. So like we have a word for that.
Okay.
But I was in a swimming pool the other day with my friend, and there were two boys. They were screaming and shouting, and I was just like, boys,
Yeah.
and I put my very fatherly voice and said,
Yeah. Good.
people here are coming from work, and we are trying to talk. La 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 la. Please go outside and play, like be noisy there. And I turned to my friend and I said, wouldn't you do that? Because I just start thinking like, I'm not at work because and he said, no, absolutely not. And I said, why? Because it's not my thing to do. And I said, yeah, but it takes a whole village to tell those kids. And
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
are talking about we are lacking some discipline, and people are just like, oh, you're just an old bald guy. And they, like, when I was working in the youth club, the kids told me, why are you swearing back? Like, why are you talking to me like that? And I said, maybe because you are talking trash to me,
Mm.
that means that you are inviting me to talk trash to you. But if you want to have a grown up conversation, then you talk to me in a way that you want me to talk to you back
Yeah.
as a grown up. You are on the verge of being a grown up. So if you start talking to me with the F word and this word, and then I just answered back, and they were just like, yeah, but you can't. Like, why can you talk to me swearing and blah blah blah, and just flipping me the finger and whatnot? Why should I take it? Yeah.
I mean, you raise a very interesting point. I think that what I want to say is that, certainly in those meetings, one of the things we would all do is have a timeout, and then I might challenge somebody
Mm-hmm.
with a very small c from a point of view of curiosity. Say, I'm noticing that when you talk to them, that your voice tone changes. It's much harder, and that you use short sentences. I'm wondering how might that be, how easy might that be to listen to? Imagine you speaking to, or someone speaking to you the way you're speaking to them, and that's just an awareness to help people recognize that if we haven't got what we call adult conversations, they don't work. And that's something I talk about in those pre-facilitated meetings. I have a conversation around that.
Mm.
But it's really good. It's a good point. You have to have the right skills to present questions in the right way without being authoritative, without being sarcastic. Passive aggressive is just a real no-no. But a lot of people do that. The younger generation, I think, go into that more readily without recognizing the consequences. So those are the things we talk about in the pre-facilitated meetings. They're complex because there's a lot to think about.
Ah, great conversation, Graham. But because I'm also thinking about sometimes in a business, somebody just has to be commanding and say, "Okay, we are going to do this right now,"
Yeah,
and then we will see. Then we will talk next week and say, "Why are we at this state?" Like, just be open about it, and just because because I was talking to young guys about the leadership style profile, and we were talking about the pace setters. Why is it bad, or is it bad? And I
no,
said,
it's not
no,
bad
it's
at
not.
all.
It's not bad,
No,
but
it's not.
sometimes there are other people who are just like more like they are just behind because they don't understand why they are running so fast. And that's why we have to meet somewhere and say, okay, we have to finish this. Like,
well, I mean, pace setters, if you haven't got pace setters, you know, all the best entrepreneurs are pace setters. What they probably need to develop is the skill of saying, so guys, I've given you some very, very clear instructions here.
yes.
What I need from you now is the questions about clarifying what I've just said. So I'm going to give you, you know, I'm not asking for it now because we run out of time or we're at the end of the meeting. I would like a question back from each of you, the one thing you want for me to clarify further. So it is always based on the assumption that the meaning that I have wanted to create in you hasn't landed in the way I wanted it to. If people understood that and then sought feedback back again, things would be great.
But it is also like the visionaries. When you start a company, you have a vision.
Yeah.
But if you can't share the vision and then you give people assignments and they go east when you want them to go northwest, and then the others like, well, conflict, and people say like, then you have to be. There are maybe some people in the group they understand what you're saying, and they should get the opportunity to say, oh yes, he means that if we do it, go this way, blah blah blah.
Well, there's another point to this. I think I haven't used this term because I think it's used in different contexts and sometimes people don't know what it's like. If you haven't got psychological safety between two people or a group, then you don't get the question. So if you've got psychological safety, you could be the most visionary, demanding pace setter. But if everybody else understands that's your style and they feel safe by going, Mike, could I just clarify something? I think I can see a hurdle here and I can't see how we're going to handle it. Can I share that with you? And he goes, yes, I want to know. Tell me.
Yeah. Of course, you should just celebrate. And we have to celebrate failures, and there are a whole lot of stuff that we can celebrate. But Graham, do you know? An hour has passed.
Yeah.
And I hear that you could talk for 2 hours more. Like this is just bonkers. So I'm starting a conflict about time management. But Jay Satchel, he has come back. So I was raised in the old days when kids were to be seen and not heard. If we wanted to raise a ruckus or play, we went outside or to the barn. There was no conflict and no need for mediation. That's just the way it was. We need to go back to that, he says. I guess you could call it getting back to basics. None of those hurt feelings or safe spaces. That's a bunch of rubbish. Again, Jay, I know you're 76, but come on. Like the world have moved like a bunch of times around the sun. But why is it like here we have a great guy and he has this, like, what would you say to him? We have to finish off.
You raised it, didn't you? It's like he's seeing that through his lens. My daughter, for instance, I sit there and I go, I want you to just think about some of the sitcoms that we watched when I was her age. And she sat there, you cannot be serious. And I go, no, we sat there and watched it. And it was okay to watch it. But today, the BBC would end up with millions of lawsuits if you play these things. So the world's moved on, you know, and the lens that young people develop is based on today. A child that is raised today is raised on the values that they see and they live and they experience. So it's no getting back to the old ways. This is what there is reality. This is their perception. If you were born a long time ago, you can make that comparison. But I'm a brilliant orienteer. I do not need sat nav. I can get myself anywhere from where I live to within a mile of a location, but my daughter has to put sat nav on. She will not let me drive unless we got sat nav. I don't need sat nav. I promise you, I can look at a map, okay, and I can get there. She has to put sat nav on, and I love her to bits. And that's just what it is, you know. So the whole environment, the culture, the values are different. Young people expect the right to be heard. So being a domineering, authentic, autocratic pace setter, they're just going to walk. And when they walk, you don't get their IP skills.
But yeah, but Jay Setchell, because he like, I have utmost biggest respect for the guy, because okay, he died 3 times. So we could give him that. No, but he will. This will be the last comment from our listeners.
Okay.
Times may have changed, so to speak, but there are still a basic respect, in quotation marks, that a lot of people just do not get at all. Respect is still a two-way street. We have to respect the younger generation. We fought with our parents. There was something called, like, people fought against the Vietnam War, and the parents in that time, they were just gutted because they didn't understand why. Yeah, but the authority says that you have to support this.
Yeah.
But the young people, they just were rebellion. But Graham, we have to finish off, because 1 hour is plenty, and you have said a lot, and it has been absolutely fantastic.
Thank
and
you.
If people will get in touch with you, like, I urge them to check your website, and it's the easy URL, graham-norris.co.uk.
That's the one.
And just loads of information, and just hire Graham, because I know that he will help you. He is guaranteed to help you. And if you can find him on LinkedIn and WhatsApp, and if you find him on LinkedIn, then you will find his telephone number, and then you can contact him on WhatsApp. So, and Graham, it's always fun to talk to you.
Yep, we had a lot of fun today. Well done.
Yeah, and well, my brain melts down, because I'm just like, whoa, it's a lot to take in, because there are so many things. It's never simple. It's never a simple thing to end up in a conflict, and we
can make it less complex.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for agreeing to be a guest on my podcast. And next time, because we have a next session in a week's time, then I will be talking to Dr. Amy Loudon Tiffany on March 5th, 2026. March, like, there is almost Christmas again. What's happening? Thursday, 5th of March, next week. High impact, healthy leadership, the biology of sustainable success. This will be interesting. And as always, people, like, check out Graham Norris's work, and be curious, be interested, be inspired. Don't avoid conflict. Sometimes they can be fun
and necessary.
Yeah, and football teams, they are always in conflict, aren't they?
Yeah.
Thank